Welcome to this episode of the Smart Leaders Sell podcast. I'm Jessica Lorimer, sales coach and leadership expert, and I am really excited to dig down into today's episode. Well, Poddies, it is midway through November. How has this happened? I was lucky enough to spend last week with my amazing masterminders and at the corporate event, the Converting Corporates event that I was hosting last week. And as I'm recording this, I'm realizing just how close it is and how I'm hoping that by the time you guys are listening to this episode, that everybody had an amazing time at the event and that I got to spend such an epic day with my mastermind, hot seating and doing some really, really fun things. So it's going to be a big week. And I imagine that given that it's midway through November and I'm well underway for my 2020 planning, I'm also going to be thinking about what's coming up for next year, what's new. And that's what I wanted to talk to you about today, was this idea of like when we come into new year, new start, we often start thinking, what else can we add to our portfolio? Like, what else can we be doing this year? And it's really interesting to me because I go through this. I get like shiny object syndrome about what I want to do with my business over the next year. I'm like, oh, maybe I should write another book. Maybe I should set up another podcast and have 3. Maybe I should do X, Y, or Z. And it can be really hard to kind of narrow down your own ideas and what you should be doing, when you should be doing it, who it's for, all that good stuff. So that's what I want to cover on today's episode. Excitingly, podcasting that pays, we're going to be running another live round. So if you are interested in podcasting, if you are somebody who's thinking, I want to set up a podcast, it would be brilliant, and by the end of this episode you've qualified whether setting up a podcast is the right thing to do for your business in 2020, then make sure that you jump in. The link is in the show notes, but you can just head to podcastingthatpays.com, grab your space before the price goes up, and you will get Scott and I's live support come the new year. It's a very, very exciting place to be. So when should you do all the things? Firstly, what a title. I'm pretty sure that if I put that into CoSchedule's free headline analyzer, it'd get like a 50 on the scale of sexy titles. And for those of you who haven't used CoSchedule's free headline analyzer tool, it really is brilliant. It's one of those things you can use to sense check whether or not your headlines are sexy enough to get people opening them. So if you've had a problem with open rates on emails and all that kind of thing, make sure that you go and check it out. It's a really good tool. So the process I'm going to share with you today is the decision-making process I make in my business when I look at just how confused sometimes I get and wanting to know whether I should really be adding something, or whether I'm adding it just because it's the latest hot trend or a new fad and I'm thinking all my friends have one of these and I don't. So you're going to get my exact process, the questions that I ask themselves, and also some tips on like the practicalities of implementing something new in your business. One of the biggest questions I've had this year from listeners has been, when should I do X? Like, when should I write a book? When should I start a podcast? How do I know when to start up an email list? The answer to that one, by the way, is totally simple. It should be the first thing you do, even if you don't have a website. Always have an email list. But it's these kinds of things that are really important. And, you know, a couple of years ago, I had a really bad AppSumo addiction. Like, I love AppSumo. I get so excited. I had to unsubscribe from their emails because I would literally, every single email they sent, I'd end up buying something and it was just not good. But over the years, because I'd end up buying so much stuff, I had so many pieces of technology in my business. And the irony was that actually a lot of it ended up doing the same thing, but I would get this shiny object syndrome every single time they sent me an email. But like, oh my God, I really need that. Oh my goodness, I really need that. And in the end, I had to do a complete cold turkey. And so I'm not going to have anything. I'm not going to have any new software for a whole year. And that's what I did this year. In fact, I unsubscribed from their emails. I didn't look at their website. I haven't looked at their website. The only email, I had 2 emails from them actually last week, saying, somebody bought through your AppSumo link and you have $10 of credit. But that's all I've heard from them, in ages. I thought I'd managed to unsubscribe from them as well, but clearly I haven't. So I've been on a cold turkey experiment, and actually what it's helped me do is really streamline my business and actually look at all the pieces of technology and think, well, do we need these? Are we actually using them? And if not, we've been really quite ruthless and got rid of them. The trouble is with the whole being in the period just before the new year is that you naturally want to add other things to your business. Now, it might not be software. You might not have the same software addiction that I do, but that might be wanting to add a new content medium. It might be wanting to experiment with Facebook ads. It might be that you are thinking about, perhaps looking at a totally different ideal client, and sorting through those kinds of things. So I always firstly start to look at, why do I actually want to do this? Why do I want to do this? Why do I want to write a book? Or why do I want to start a podcast? Or why do I want to add a new revenue stream to the business? And the key thing here is that it has to be commercially viable. Now, I love this phrase. It's one that I used to use in corporate all the time. And it's one that if you listen to the Selling to Corporates podcast that I run, that you will have heard me say a few times now. Being commercially viable means that something needs to add a return on investment to your business in some way, shape, or form. So, for example, you might look at, why do I want to write a book? Well, I want to build my brand and I want to build my authority and credibility in the space. That's a great reason to write a book, okay? If you want to build your brand, your credibility, awesome, fabulous, get a book. As long as you meet other criteria, because in order to be commercially viable and look for that return investment, the return on investment for that particular shift, move, change doesn't necessarily need to have an ROI of money, but you have to be making sure that your business is profitable enough to cover the initial cost of doing something differently. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, here's the thing. Everything that you say yes to means that you have to say no to something else. Writing a book isn't actually that difficult in terms of, if you know your subject matter and you like to write, it's not necessarily that hard, but it is really time consuming. So in saying yes to writing a book, you have to say no to other things that take up your time, which might be one-to-one clients. But if that's where your money comes from, you might either have to find a compromise or set yourself a date to do it at a later point. Okay, so that's the first question you've got to ask yourself. Why am I doing this? Or why would I want to be doing this? The other thing is, what's the purpose? What is the purpose of me doing this? Okay, for my audience. So I looked at this about a year ago when I decided that Facebook just wasn't for me. I wasn't being able to serve my audience in the best way for me or the best way for them. And it meant that they were kind of getting this like half-assed approach. Sometimes I would be communicative, sometimes I wouldn't. I felt very resentful of the platform and how much time it was taking out of like my, I don't know, zen. Every time I opened it up, I was like, oh my goodness, all these people and they need me to do things. They have to react right away. It's not good enough to let them wait for a response for a couple of hours. It's really stressful for me, which meant it's really stressful for everybody else, because then I would be under this huge pressure to act straight away and react straight away. And what that meant was that I set this crazy example that everybody had to do that. And it's not possible. It's not possible for everybody to do that. So it just wasn't working for me. It wasn't working for my audience. So you have to think about, when you are implementing something new, what's the purpose of this for my audience? Is it actually something that's going to bring them a benefit? Or is it something that could actually do them a disservice? Now, I see this most when people are thinking about offers and they're like, right, I'm going to jam in everything that I possibly can. I'm going to put in another bonus. I'm going to add another Facebook group. I'm going to add more calls. I'm going to do more X. I'm going to provide more content, because they think that the value isn't there with the initial outcome. But those things are overwhelming. They're really difficult for your audience to keep up with. And if they can't keep up, they feel like they've failed. Okay, so always be thinking, if you're considering adding anything new to your business, well, what's the purpose of this for my audience? For example, moving from Facebook to having a podcast was the best thing I could ever have done in my business. I know I don't sound very excited about it right now, but that's because my voice is killing me. But it was the best thing I could ever have done, because it meant that my business became, or it wasn't so reliant on me being reactive. It meant I could answer questions in more detail. I could spend more time on them. And actually, it gave me this really awesome way to communicate with my audience that meant that they could listen at their own convenience. The purpose for them was to get better quality information in the most convenient way possible. They can be out there, and people email about me with this all the time. They tell me, oh, Jess, I was out on this dog walk today and I listened to this podcast that you recorded, or I was driving my kids to school and I was so glad that you warned me before you dropped a swear word so that I could turn it off quickly. You know, people listen on the tube when they're commuting to work. It's all these things that make a real difference. The purpose has stayed the same: better quality information in a convenient way, and it meets that need. But if the purpose is only serving you, so for example, if it's a bit more ego driven and you're thinking, well, I want to do it because, you know, I just want to do it, or you're thinking, oh, I'm going to do it because everybody else is doing it, those aren't the best reasons. That doesn't give your audience a purpose. That you adding something new that ultimately they're going to have to fit into their day and they're going to have to make time for. Because the thing about having an audience is that they are loyal. They want you to succeed and they want to be part of it, which makes sense. But in supporting you, it means they need to find more time to consume your content, to spend time with you, to listen to the things that you're doing, to read, to download, all that stuff. And that takes them time. It takes them out of their own space. So just make sure that whatever you're doing has a very, very clear purpose for them. The other thing that you have to be thinking about, obviously, is what's the purpose for you? So yes, it can't be entirely ego driven or egocentric, but there does have to be a winning situation for you. Is it going to help you make more money? Is it going to build your brand or reputation in the market? Is it going to honestly make your life easier or more joyful? Like, one of the best things I ever did was recently when we were planning out the corporate event. Somebody said, but all events, somebody on my team, all events that you go to, they start at 8:30 in the morning or 8 o'clock in the morning. And I hate that. Like, I really do. I hate getting up at 8 o'clock in the morning. Well, I hate getting up at like 7 o'clock in the morning to try and caffeinate myself before an event, rush over there. Then the event lasts until like 5 o'clock. And by about 3 o'clock, I'm hungry and I'm tired and I'm, you know, not necessarily taking in the information to the best of my ability anymore. And then there's like drinks. And so it becomes this whole big thing. And so when I was thinking about my event and the transformation I wanted people to get alongside the experience, one of the rules was I didn't want to start before 9:30. Didn't want content to start before 9:30. It's really important. And actually, the schedule that we've ended up with means that we don't actually start content on either day until 10. The event will, I'm hoping, finish promptly at 4 o'clock each day to give people enough time to get home. We've got an hour for lunch and networking, 2 breaks throughout the day, and we've got like a little networking drinks in the evening on day 1 between 5 and 7. So it's enough for people to be able to spend time recharging. If they're introverted like me, actually get some time alone before networking drinks, have some hermit time, do their thing. But also if they're more extroverted, to spend more time with people and to get the content they need in a time frame that works, so they're not knackered halfway through the day and thinking, oh God, I really wish this is over. So the purpose there for me was that I could get to deliver the best quality information in a time frame that works for me. You know, my audience, the purpose for them was clearly threefold. They got as much time for networking as possible, as much time for relaxing as possible, and all the information they could possibly need, and workshops they could possibly need to get the results that they wanted. You know, so it's got to be mutually beneficial. Whatever you're thinking about adding, whether it is an event, whether it's a book, a podcast, an entirely new content medium, lead generation method, anything like that, you've always got to be thinking about purpose for you and for your audience. The other thing you've got to consider is how much will it cost? It's not necessarily expensive to do certain things. Writing a book for me costed me nothing. I didn't have to pay anything to actually write the book. And actually publishing, I self-published my book, Smart Leaders Sell, back in 2017. And it wasn't hugely costly, okay, in terms of money. What was expensive was the amount of time that it took to plan, to write, to edit, to do all of those other things with. And so that's what you've got to be thinking about. If you are adding something to your business that you are expecting to have an ROI, it needs to be profitable. So what's it actually going to cost you in the first place? Setting up a podcast, for example, is relatively inexpensive. You need a microphone. You can usually record it. I record on Zoom. I love Zoom. I think it's brilliant. And you can record on any of your normal software. I've been away and at conferences and things and couldn't make Zoom work because of the Wi-Fi situation. So I've used QuickTime, and you can use literally anything, Audacity, QuickTime, whatever programs they have on laptops that aren't Macs. I'm terrible now. I'm really bad at knowing, I should say Windows laptop, shouldn't I? That's the phrase I'm looking for. I'm terrible now because I have a Mac. All I ever think of is in Mac terms. It makes my life quite challenging when I start thinking, like, what do you call it? Is it PC? Is it Windows? Like, what is it now? But it's really important. Like, what is it going to cost you? A podcast, relatively inexpensive. Again, on the equipment side, I've got a Blue Yeti mic, and that's really good. And it doesn't cost me like tons to actually record. But I do have to pay a podcast producer because I'm not patient enough to edit myself. And so if you are considering a podcast, you would need to think about editing, whether you are going to learn that skill, which, just as an FYI, we teach inside Podcasting That Pays. Scott teaches it because he's a hero. Or whether you're going to get somebody else to do it, and that can cost anywhere from a price per episode to a retained price that you're going to have to pay every month. Okay. The ROI can be huge. I don't know whether you guys listened, but a couple of weeks ago I had an episode out that talked about the exact numbers that I've made from both of my podcasts, how much Smart Leaders Sell made in its first year, how much Selling to Corporates has made in its first 5 episodes, and broke that down entirely. So it had a huge opportunity for me. For me, there was this huge ROI that I could see I was leaving on the table if I didn't set up a podcast. My book, on the other hand, has been more of a business card over the years, right? I spent time on writing it, which costs me money. I then spent money on having it formatted and uploaded Amazon KDP because, again, I'm not the sort of person that can figure that kind of stuff out on my own. I bought ISBN numbers for it so that it was all barcoded and stuff correctly. And you know what? We don't make tons of money out of it every quarter. Amazon don't pay a lot per book. And so actually the book has been more of a business card over the last couple of years. It's been something that has encouraged people to take further action steps with me. And sometimes people talk about it at events or will go and buy it. It was so funny. Recently, I spoke at Retain Live in September, and Mike and Callie were so lovely. They came up to me and said, "Oh, we bought copies of your book for everybody to be able to read as part of the goodie bag." And I was like, you guys are hilarious. Like, I'd have just, you could have told me that. I'd have brought them up in my suitcase, but they bought them all from Amazon. And I was quite glad about that in the end because my journey to Newcastle was a bit of a trek. But it's that kind of thing. The book is a business card for me. It doesn't make a ton of money every quarter. If you want to be a really successful author, then you have to really focus your time and energy on being a super successful author. And that's something that I don't currently have that time or energy for. So think about the cost of things. How much is it going to cost you initially? How much will the ongoing cost be? And then think about what's that ROI. What is the potential ROI? Sometimes we do things for vanity projects. And that's always interesting, isn't it? Sometimes we do things because we want to be able to say that we've done something that everybody else is doing or that maybe not many people are doing. I obviously chose to work with Ali Brown this year, and that is a hugely expensive endeavor. However, I didn't do it so I could say to people, "Oh, well, I'm working with Ali this year." I did it because there was a clear ROI for me in that decision. I knew that in working with her, I'd be able to push myself out of my comfort zone, that I would make bigger and bolder decisions. And I had certain things around my intellectual property, my messaging, and things that I wanted to hone and really focus on. And I wanted somebody who was known for being innovative and who was known for creating different models and helping different people. Very expensive investment, but huge ROI. And you have to consider that too, right? When you're looking at, changing something in your business, whether that is hiring a new staff member or getting a new lead gen system or implementing a new content medium, you have to look at what that ROI is going to be. Is there a clear ROI, or is it something you're just doing because you're like, well, looks like fun and everyone else is doing it and I kind of want to do it? And going from that perspective. And if that's the reasoning, you're just kind of like, well, it seems fun. Don't. It's not the right time yet. Doesn't mean it never will be, but it's not the right time yet. And we see this quite often, or I see this quite often, when people buy courses or programs and they're like, well, the person said that the price will go up next time. And, often it does. But sometimes if you're buying it because you're like, well, maybe it's a good thing, maybe it's a good thing, and you're not certain that it's going to have a clear ROI, don't buy it. Because the likelihood is next time, yes, you may pay more, but you actually might get a better result. And I say that as the sales coach who buys everything on early bird, right? But it's true. There have been courses and programs that I've bought over the years that it hasn't been the right time for me, but I've bought it because I've been so afraid that maybe next time it wouldn't be right or whatever. The time has to be right for you to actually use it in order to generate an ROI. I say that about anything, any coaching experience, any event, any course, program, product, or service. If you're not going to use it, it's a negative ROI, so don't do it. Yeah? Don't buy it just because you think, oh, well, I'm getting a deal. Well, that's great. But, if it just sits there for 6 months, you don't do anything with it, and then you end up going and buying the next new big thing, it's not going to get you the results anyway. So if you are going to buy something, commit to it, get the results from it, get the ROI. So that's the way that I typically look at the things I'm changing for the next year. Those are the questions that I ask myself. And yes, we are going to be doing a what's coming in 2020 episode, so you can find out the sneak peek and preview of what will be going on in my business. But a couple of quick tips, for people who are thinking, well, Jess, these questions are great and I'm asking myself them, but is there a ballpark figure for when I should do certain things? Because people ask me a lot, like, when should I write a book? There's no hard and fast rule, and that's why often it's quite a difficult question to answer. But there are a few things that you need to have in your business to achieve other things. So, for example, in order for your business to make money, you need to have sales skills. Okay, you just do. It's one of those things. I'm in a very, very fortunate industry where it's obvious to me and everybody who works in my industry that if you don't have any sales skills, your business will go bust really, really quickly. People often think that it makes it easier to sell my services. It really doesn't. It's surprising the amount of people who will tell me every day of the week that they want to make more sales, but they never want to have to sell. So they'll invest in more marketing courses than you can shake a stick at, or more mindset training they can shake a stick at. And what they really needed was practical sales help. They just didn't want to do the work. That's okay. Like, it's totally okay. I don't judge anybody. But you always have to look at what is going to be the priority. So before you worry about everything else, always make sure you have a level of sales skill. By listening to this podcast, you can find out like loads and loads over the 250 odd episodes that we've got now of different sales techniques and ways of selling and psychological triggers, why people buy, all that kind of thing. You can look at all of that just by listening to the podcast. Okay. So you always need to have sales skills. The next thing is you always need to have lead generation, like a lead generation method that works for you. Now, personally, I love podcasting. My podcast generates the majority of my leads these days. We get so many people who come up at events and things and say, oh my God, I love your podcast. I listen all the time. And we have people who've listened for the whole 2 years that the podcast has been going, which I think is phenomenal. I just think that's such a great relationship builder. I have really good friends and colleagues who have lead generation methods that involve YouTube, other social media channels like Facebook, like Twitter, like LinkedIn. It doesn't really matter what you pick. The point is you must have lead generation. So, if you're thinking about like, when should I have a lead generation process in place? At the beginning, like, make sure you've got an email autoresponder set up, make sure you've got a lead generation process, make sure you have basic sales skills so you can actually sell things. When it comes to like, when should I do X? Like, if podcasting or YouTubing or blogging or whatever is going to be your lead gen method, go and make it happen. But pick one and do one really well. The biggest mistake I see people making is that they're like, oh, I'm going to just do, I'm going to try them all. I'm going to have a YouTube channel, and I'm going to have a podcast, and I'm going to have this and a that. I always think you must spend so much time creating content. When do you actually do any delivery? Like, when do you actually get to do any sales activity? And that's one of the correlations that we see. People who are producing tons and tons of content are not necessarily making tons and tons of money. Yeah, unless of course you are my friend Janet Murray, who is a content machine. Everything is a content opportunity, as she will tell you, and she's phenomenal at that. She also has a great team to support her, and she has spent years learning the skills that she has so that she can help people build their audience on any platform. Like, she's experimented with everything. But when you're newer to business, it's really hard to do all of the things. And even she says this, right? We talk about it a lot. Do one thing well, master that, and then branch out. Same with anything. Master one sales strategy really, really well, sell one offer really, really well, and then branch out. Don't try and do all the things. Sell to one ideal client really well, master it, and then branch out. Okay. So lead generation is another. Authority and credibility is a big thing. If you want to be a speaker, most people will expect you, if you want to speak at events, to have a book or a podcast or both. And so if you are somebody who's considering, like, I want to be on stages and things like that, those things can be really helpful. They are not essentials, but they can be really helpful for increasing your authority in your space, increasing your thought leadership, and increasing credibility for other people. Makes it easier for them to make a decision on whether you should be speaking on their stage or not. Okay, so if that's something you want to do, great. But always assess, is this the right time for me? I wanted to potentially speak on stages when I started my business almost 6 years ago now. It's only in the last 18 months that I've actually been able to do it, that I've actually had the time to dedicate not only to networking effectively to get the right speaking opportunities, but also to write a book, to have a podcast, to give myself more credibility and authority in my space so that people could rely on me being a speaker, to actually spend time honing my speaking skills was another thing that I didn't have time for at the beginning, because at the beginning I needed to make money, and making money through speaking was not ever my primary endeavor. That wasn't where I was going to make the money quickest. I was never going to be, right at the beginning, a £10,000 paid keynote speaker, because nobody knew who I was, and I hadn't been a speaker in a previous life. I'd presented corporate trainings and things like that for sure, but I hadn't been a speaker. Yeah. So start thinking about that. Where are you on your journey? And do things in a way that says, okay, well, if I want to be a speaker, but actually right now I need to focus on cash flow, that's fine. Like, great. Set yourself a goal. By the end of next year, I will have the sales systems in place and the marketing strategies in place to make sure that in 2021, I can go on those stages. I can write that book. I can do those things, or even quicker. It doesn't have to take a whole year to get things into place. Like, you can make major changes within 90 days. So you could spend 90 days really focusing on getting everything else nailed, making a bunch of money, giving yourself the cash flow, and then doing whatever the heck you like with that. But it's important to do it in the right order, not to think that there's a certain time frame or a certain amount of followers you have to have before you do anything. that's not the case. But you've always got to go back to your primary goals. You know, what is my primary focus for the next 90 days? If it's cash flow, you need to focus on sales. If it's marketing and lead generation, you need to focus on that. If it's building credibility and authority, you need to focus on those things. But you need to be making sure that you're acting in a way that is strategic, and you're making strategic decisions around your business and how it's going to grow so that it actually happens. I'm excited to see you for Friday's episode. We're going to be talking about content mediums for part of our new series about future-proofing your business for 2020. And we're going to be talking about content mediums and where I think they're going in 2020, what you should be using them for, and who fits different styles of content. It's going to be a goodie. So I will see you in that episode. Like I say, if you are interested in podcasting, take a listen to the episode a couple of weeks ago where I broke down how I made Smart Leaders Sell and the Selling to Corporates podcast successful over the last couple of years. Take some tips and tricks. And if you want any more information, you can always head over to Podcasting That Pays and check it out there as well. I'll see you in the next episode.